Hello, everyone, and welcome back if you were able to join us for the first session of our afternoon with the Corporate Law Society. Welcome indeed to the College of Law's Law Alumni Weekend 2020. I'm Sophie Degenet, Assistant Dean for Advancement and External Affairs at the College of Law. Thank you for joining us for today's afternoon. Like our first panel of experts, our second panel shines a bright light on College of Law alumni and their extraordinary careers. Before I turn the program over to my co-host, second-year law student Kelsey Gonzalez, I do have a few housekeeping matters that I'd like to share with you. First, we have a record-sized audience today. Nearly 200 have registered for this program. We are in webinar mode, which means that the audience can hear and see all of our panelists and presenters, but the audience is not on video. It is also muted to prevent noise interference. Please note, the chat feature has been disabled, except for the panelists to convey universal guidance to all of you during the program. That said, we welcome all questions from the audience. Please use the Q&A pod, which you will find at the bottom of your screen, to send them along. We'll monitor the board and include them in our discussion. We thank our CART reporter, Jessica Spriggs, for her services today, and our live captioning sponsor, the Willadis Law Firm. Any member of our audience can view instantaneous translations of the spoken language during this program by clicking the closed caption button at the bottom of your meeting window. Today's session is planned for 90 minutes, finishing at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. A recording of the session will be available on the College of Law's website. It is now my pleasure to introduce Kelsey Gonzalez, College of Law Class of 2022 and Vice President of the Corporate Law Society. She is from Charlotte, North Carolina, and her undergraduate degree is from UNC. Kelsey is busy. In addition to the Corporate Law Society, she is on law review and an active participant in the Travis H.D. Lewin Advocacy Honors Society. Kelsey?
Thank you, Vice Dean Degenet. Like you said, my name is Kelsey Gonzalez. I'm the Vice President of Corporate Law Society. I really want to thank everyone for joining us and taking the time to be here today. We are grateful to partner with the Office of Alumni Relations to host today's panels. Ms. Duggleby and Dean Degenet have put so much work into hosting these panels, and we're really appreciative of the work that they've put into it. We also want to thank, of course, all of our panelists who have taken the time to be here and really provide some insight into what practicing in the field of corporate law is really like. So this year, the Corporate Law Society would like to take advantage of our virtual capacity as much as possible, despite everything that's going on. We want to engage a larger audience than we normally would be able to and host even more speakers than we normally would. So providing students with this understanding of corporate law and the various career paths within it is our primary objective every year. And even though Zoom is not the most ideal capacity for doing so, networking specifically, we can still utilize it to our advantage. So the first panel earlier was practicing law in-house, and now this panel is going to be practicing law in a firm. And we hope we're able to give students the ability to really see as many different perspectives as possible so they can understand the breadth that corporate law truly covers. So the panel again will be about 90 minutes. There's a Q&A box. Please use it. If you have any questions, feel free. And that being said, we're grateful for everyone's participation. And now I would like to introduce our moderator, Professor Stokes. Professor Stokes comes to Syracuse from the law firm McGuire Woods. She assisted clients with land use and real estate transactions. And while she was at the University of Virginia School of Law, she was on the editorial board for the Journal of Social Policy and Law. She also served on the Policy Council for the University of Virginia chapter of the Black Law Students Association and as a moot court specialist for the National Black Law Students Association. Here at Syracuse, Professor Stokes teaches both LCR and environmental law courses. So if you have any interest in that, feel free to reach out to her. And that being said, I will hand it over to you, Professor Stokes.
Thank you, Kelsey. It's my pleasure to be here, and especially my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists and get to have a conversation with them. We're very appreciative to the Corporate Law Society for giving us the opportunity to be together and share experiences. As you've already heard, you can provide questions at any point throughout our conversation via the Q&A box, and we'll be checking those periodically and trying to filter in your questions to the extent possible throughout the conversation. And we'll also leave some dedicated time at the end specifically for questions. So I'd like to begin by introducing our panelists. First, we have Amy D'Ambrosio, who is counsel at the Syracuse office of Barclay Damon. Amy's practice involves national real property tax compliance and defense work relating to property taxation. Amy primarily concentrates her practice on representing businesses, energy and utility clients, and individuals in real property tax, eminent domain, and land use disputes. Amy also counsels healthcare clients who are responding to Medicaid and other government investigations, including audits. We now have Hermes Fernandez, who is a partner at Bond, Shinnick & King's Albany, New York office. Hermes concentrates his practice in the areas of administrative and legislative law, health law, government regulation and litigation, advising clients on the requirements of and compliance with state statutes and regulations. Prior to joining the firm, Hermes served as assistant counsel to Governor Mario Cuomo, was a trial attorney with the Civil Division of the Department of Justice, and served as a judicial clerk to the Honorable John A. McKenzie, Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. We also have David Wales, who is partner in the Antitrust and Competition Group in Skadden's Washington, D.C. office. He has served as director of the Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Competition and as counsel to the Assistant Attorney General in the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. In addition to transactional matters, Mr. Wales represents clients in antitrust litigation, cartels, and other government investigations. He's received numerous accolades, including being ranked in Legal 500, Best Lawyers, as well as both Chambers USA and Chambers Global as a leading lawyer for business. We also have Lana Yagi, who is a senior corporate attorney at Miller Cansfield, who splits her time between the Washington, D.C. and Qatar office, which she actually helped to found. She regularly advises U.S. and foreign clients on their cross-border business activities in connection with the establishment of operations and negotiation of commercial arrangements. Prior to joining Miller Cansfield, Lana was an associate at K&L Gates, served as a legal fellow at the office of Senator Kristen Gillibrand, and was a volunteer attorney for the New York State Office of the Attorney General. This year, Lana was recognized by Best Lawyers as one to watch in corporate governance and compliance law in Washington, D.C. Last but certainly not least, we have Cisco Palau-Ricketts, who is a partner in the Silicon Valley office of DLA Piper. He serves as the leader of its West Coast employee benefits and executive compensation practice. He advises startup, emerging growth, and public companies on complex tax, securities, employment, and ERISA issues that arise in compensation agreements. He has been recognized by the Legal 500 for his expertise in ERISA and employee benefit counseling. Cisco is also a member of the College of Law's Board of Advisors. As you can see, our panelists have some very, very, very impressive bios, and we're only going to be able to scratch the surface this afternoon. And if you'd like more information, or if you'd like to read a more comprehensive background about each of our panelists, that information is available on the alumni webpage, as well as been provided to you in the chat function. So let's kick off our conversation, and I'm actually going to ask each of our panelists to respond to this. How did you land your current position, and did you always plan to be in your current field of practice? We'll begin with you, Hermes.
Well, let me start with the second question first. I didn't intend to be fully in my field of practice, but in part I did. Mentioned I do administrative law and government relations, and I'd always had an interest in government. I started my career in government. First 9 years, right, was as a judicial clerk, then in the Justice Department, then in the governor's office. And I used to tell people this fairly regularly, that what I did was I began as a judicial clerk, helping to decide whether the government made mistakes. I went to the Justice Department, where I defended government mistakes. I became a staffer to Governor Cuomo, where I helped make government mistakes. And now in my practice ever since, it's been trying to shield clients from government mistakes. It's somewhat flippant, but it does touch some of the bases of what I've done. How I got here to this firm that I've now been with for 30 years, there was not a great plan in that regard. I never saw myself practicing law in Albany. Before I did practice in law in Albany, I had been in Albany once before on a drunken college weekend, and that was it. But I was fortunate at the Justice Department. I got a chance to work for Mario Cuomo, who at the time, he's now known as Andrew's father, but at the time I worked for him, he was the leading light of the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. And so that was, we had amazing people working together, a great energetic staff. And my wife and I decided to stay in Albany. It simply fit that with small children, allowed me to pursue an interesting practice and still get home and coach Little League. So that's as much as anything in terms of how I came to where I am today. There's some happenstance and some plan.
Thank you. I'm sure that theme will be throughout each of our panelists. What about you, Lana? Could you give us your response?
Yes, thank you, Professor Stokes, and thank you for having me, and Kelsey and Sophie for reaching out. And I'm really honored to be part of this panel, and I'm not sure that I really deserve to be, but I'm going to answer similar to how Hermes answered. I'm going to answer with the second question first. So I knew at law school what I didn't like. Even though I had an amazing Civ Pro professor, I didn't like civil procedure, but I loved contracts and commercial transactions. And my commercial transactions professor at the time was Professor Aviva Abramovsky. She's now dean of, I think, Buffalo Law School. And she introduced me to an alum, and one of her former students. And he was working in the Middle East, and I'm an Arabic speaker, and I wanted to work at a big firm. So she made the introduction. I realized I wasn't going to get a job at a big firm in New York City. And so this alum found me a job, helped find me a job in Qatar. I moved to Qatar, lived there for 3 years, worked at K&L Gates there, and then transferred with K&L Gates back to DC. And since then, I've moved firms, a much smaller outfit. It's called Miller Canfield. It's a Michigan law firm, but it's given me so many opportunities, such as, helping found the Qatar office, and kind of practicing law the way I'd like to. So it's been a really fun ride so far.
Thank you. And what about you, Cisco?
Well, thank you, Professor Stokes. I appreciate being invited on this panel, and very grateful to meet all of you virtually. I got started, I would say, how did I land my current position, to handle the first question first. Believe it or not, I had a roommate at Syracuse who did well in school, and he got offered a job at a big law firm in Denver, Colorado, called Holm Roberts and Owen, that is now part of Bryan Cave, which is a St. Louis-based big law firm. And he helped me get a job out of school, but I had chosen as a third year to kind of pursue employee benefits after taking the pension and employee benefits class that was essentially, I think, back then available to third-year law students. And it was taught by an adjunct professor from Bond, Shinek, and King named Brian Keith Haynes. And after taking Tax 1 and Tax 2 with Professor Nassau and Professor Germain and estate and gift tax, I had pretty much found my calling in law school, that I wanted to be a tax attorney. I just didn't know which kind of tax attorney. So I took income tax, corporate tax, partnership tax, and then this kind of odd class on employee benefits and executive compensation. And that was the one that did it for me, because it involved not just like the crossword puzzle of handling complex tax questions, but instead of it just involving squares, triangles, and circles with corporate entities, it involved a little bit more of the human side of the law and dealing with executives and employees who, are having their compensation structured pretty much fairly constantly to be efficient from a tax perspective. And so it really did work for me. And then kind of circling back after I, fell in love with ERISA, my ex-roommate from Syracuse helped me get a job at my first law firm, got me an interview, and it kind of took off from there.
Great. So it sounds like networking was a key component of your story, and I'm sure that will come up a bit more as we talk today. Amy, what about you?
My path to my job is a little bit different. So when I was in law school many moons ago, they had what's called a mock interview program, which I don't know if you still do now. I knew a few years back you did, because I actually sat on the other side of the table for you guys, and I enjoyed it because it was such a good experience for me. At the time, it was called Career Services, and they had these little slats up against the wall where you could slip your resume in to different firms that you wanted to consider for a position, because this is pre LinkedIn and all that great stuff. We're talking about ancient times, and we had flip phones back then. And as part of the process, they encouraged us to participate in the mock interview program, where they would have attorneys from here in Syracuse, from some of the bigger firms, come in and interview you for a position and then critique you. So I signed up, and the person that I was paired with, I did my interview. We got along wonderfully. And he asked me, have you put in a resume to our firm? And my response to him was, I kid you not, I've never heard of your firm. and he laughed, and he said, I think you'd be a great fit at our firm, based on your resume and just talking to you. And he said, I insist, I'm taking your resume back to our hiring committee, and I'm going to get you an interview. I said, okay, sounds good. And so I interviewed with another 2 individuals, and I liked what I heard, and I got a summer position. I was able to work in every practice area, so I could get a kind of a flavor for what they had. And I impressed certain people in certain groups, and was offered a position. And I thought, you know what, I like the people here, and I'm from Syracuse. I went to Syracuse. I have a very close-knit Italian immigrant family. Both of my parents were born and raised there, so I couldn't be too far away from them. I couldn't travel too far away. I knew I wanted to stay home and practice and be close to where they were, and keep my roots here. And what was Hiscock and Barkley back then has now become Barkley Damon, and I've been here for 18 years now.
Thank you. So that's a great example of how being prepared and showing up with all your P's and Q's together could land you a job. So sometimes it's luck and a combination of skills. So David, what about you?
Yeah, so thanks, Professor Stokes, and thanks very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here today. And so I'm part of the 25th anniversary class this year. So I could take a step-by-step through my 25-year career. That would take a while. But I'm the kind of person that you look at my resume and say, this guy can't hold a job. I've had a lot of experiences, and I am an antitrust lawyer. And so some people may wonder what that is. Certainly in my career path, I don't think anybody starts out and saying, I want to be an antitrust lawyer. Maybe they do. Once in a while, I kind of see people that I'm suspicious a little bit when people say that. But for me, I would say kind of the most important thing about, my path has really just been luck, and taking advantage of luck. And so I went to Syracuse, had a great experience there. I knew one thing I did know is I wanted to go to New York City and work for a big firm. I had no idea what that meant or what practices. And so I got a summer job. I had to pick, practice areas I wanted to be in. So what did I pick? Litigation. I picked a corporate group. And then I think like the Microsoft case was going, I'm like, I'll put antitrust down. I think it was like my 4th choice. And so what do I get? Of course, it was antitrust. I did get bankruptcy too. And so hopefully no offense to any bankruptcy lawyers, but I hated that. But I got to rotate through antitrust. And, it was fascinating. It's a practice that really involves getting to know the business. It's definitely an area of the law that's not very black and white. And so unlike tax and some of the others, the answers are much vaguer, and they really are dependent on the business people. So I got to hang out with the business people, got to, learn really interesting things about markets. I didn't have an econ background, but I faked it, I guess long enough. So I worked, I graduated, I worked in New York at a big firm at Sherman, loved it. And then at some point, took advantage of an opportunity in Washington. A lot of antitrust lawyers kind of gravitate. That's where the antitrust authorities are. And so I ended up moving to Sherman's Washington office and had a great experience. But one of my mentors at the firm said, hey, maybe you should consider government experience. And I said, okay, never really had planned that, right? So I put my name in for a job over at DOJ and I got it, but pure luck. I didn't even know the people there, went over there, had a great experience, got to know some great people, came back to Sherman, made partner. And then my boss at the Department of Justice became the chairman of the Federal Trade Commission, which is the other antitrust authority. She said, hey, you want to come work for me? And so wasn't planning that, but went and worked for the other federal antitrust authority, had a great experience there, did that for 3 years, which was longer than I'd planned. I was a political appointee, came out and went to another big law firm, had a great experience. And then now I'm at Skadden. So I've been at Skadden for about 2.5 years. And so that's kind of the trajectory.
Thank you. So David's been all around. He's done both the public sector and private sector. So he has, both insights, as does Hermes. So as you can see, there's no one path to your destination. And that is in corporate law, that's in public service, in whatever you're doing. There are always many, many avenues to get where you're going. So I wanted to just make one request for those asking questions. If it's the case that the question, you'd like it directed to one person in particular, please try to indicate that. Otherwise, we'll pose it as best we can. And then two, if you are an alumni or a student, if you want to try to let us know that as well, that can help us kind of guide the responses. So let's just move right along. And Cisco sort of mentioned this in his practice development and kind of understanding that he wanted to work with ERISA. But Lana, could you tell us, how did law school prepare you for your current roles and responsibilities?
So I think that something that students hear all the time, and I promise you it's true and it's a way of life, is that IRAC is everything. Like, trust your professors on this one. I do not remember most of the case law that I studied. I mean, there were great lessons in class, but in my everyday interaction with clients, they want answers and they want really concise advice. I worked a lot in Qatar, as I mentioned, and I worked a lot with lawyers qualified in England and Wales. And they're wonderful attorneys, but one of the reasons clients love American lawyers is we tend to be more, we keep answers short, and we tell we help direct clients. So I think IRAC is everything. I also think that one thing that law school provides you that we don't really take advantage of as students as much as we should is wonderful professors. I know that our law school may not be ranked in the top 20, but we have some of the most amazing minds in the country. And some of our professors are the reason that I am where I've gotten. So for example, Professor Turnipseed runs the DCX program. Because of him, I got a position at the office of Senator Gillibrand, who's a New York senator. And because that was on my resume, it helped me get a job at K&L Gates. My contracts professor was Tara Helfman. She was an extraordinary woman, and she made me realize that I wanted to go into corporate law and not into litigation. So your professors are really there to guide you, and they're going to connect you with people who can help you going forward. Another thing that Syracuse offers is this Law in London program. I did that program as well. So take advantage of opportunities outside of the classroom to help advance your career and to build your resume, and use it as a networking opportunity too, right? Because those connections, those alums that you're gonna meet, they're gonna help you connect with other people. So the internship I did in London was for an SU alum who ended up knowing someone at K&L Gates when I applied to the firm. And once I got in, he wrote a wonderful letter of recommendation. And so when I got there, everyone was ready to be impressed by me. And it was very helpful to have that and for him to introduce me to other people at the firm. So not only did I know people at the Qatar office because of him, I knew people in New York. And because of that, I got to travel to the New York office and work out of the New York office. So I really think people don't take advantage of their relationships with their professors.
Thank you. And a question that was raised in the midst of your response is, what advice would you or any of our other panelists have for students who are navigating the recruiting process, but they may not have the best grades or they may have other challenges? What advice would you have for them? Lana, do you have a response? And then we'll look to some others who likely do a lot of hiring as well.
Definitely. So I want to emphasize that I was not in the top 10% of my class, like not by a long shot. But what I did was I did reach out to the alums. And I promise you that anyone who graduated from our law school knows how difficult it is to get hired. So they're willing to help. They'll connect you with people. So go for coffees. You might not get an interview. You might not get a summer position. But the more people you meet that went to our law school, the more likely they are to put you in contact with someone who may know someone who can help you. So that would be my takeaway.
This is Cisco. I also did not graduate in the top 10% of my class. And I would say that obviously grades do matter. Grades can be something that can put you in the line, so to speak. But if you don't have them, that's not the end of the world, because as a person who is in charge of hiring and co-chair of my practice group, the biggest thing that I'm looking for when somebody walks in the doors is their ability to work hard. I'm looking for work ethic and commitment and genuine interest. I coach my kids' baseball team, and I've been doing that now for 4 years. And the same principles that, believe it or not, I use with 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds kind of apply to the practice of law. And that is that if someone is having fun with what they're doing, and if they enjoy what they're doing, they're going to excel at it. They're going to do really well at it, and they're going to do the extra little things to become an expert, to become that source, to become the person that wants to do it. And that bleeds out, and it's like a tattoo on your arm. And if you can show that in an interview, or if you can show that in your resume or your cover letter, it makes all the difference. For me, believe it or not, when I was doing my interviews, I didn't accept just one job because of my buddy Carlos, who I'd mentioned before. I had interviewed and had a couple of other offers from other law firms. And the thing that really stuck out for almost all of them that gave me offers was that I went ahead and wrote an article that got published by the Journal of Pension Planning and Compliance on ERISA fiduciary duties, and also the ability to seek remedies under 502(a)(3) of ERISA. And when I mentioned that in my interviews, it captured everyone's attention that, hey, this guy he's 25 years old, he's hardly practiced law at all, but here he is being conversant about a section of ERISA that is very complex, and has gone out on his own to write, a 40-page article with 250 footnotes without anyone asking him to do so. And so that's the thing that I would say is the biggest thing that you can put out there, is that you're committed and that you're willing to work hard.
Could I put in my 2 cents as well? I think Cisco's right. I mean, grades do matter. They really are an initial, they're an initial cut line. And so they become very easy for employers to look at. But if you don't have grades, there's other things that you can do, which I think I'm going to parrot Cisco to a certain extent, which is, and I think this is true if you do have grades, what's your passion? It's pretty easy to distinguish between people who are mailing it in and people who enjoy what they do. And the people who are enjoying what they do are digging into it and becoming really, if expert's not the right word, it may be just simply they have a deep well of knowledge, right? And they continue to pursue that, and they can share that with the clients, and they can show a client what way to go and how to do it, because they've covered the basis, right? They've got the context, and they can go beyond that. The other thing that is also very useful, it may not be quite as useful as when you're coming out of law school as it becomes through your career, is I found bar association involvement to be extremely useful. But it doesn't have to be bar association involvement. If you've got an interest in a particular field, join some of the associations that are in those fields, and you have to become very active. You have to become, the people will see you've got an interest, and they will also see your talents and ability because you are participating and you're active. Again, for me, it was the Bar Association. I am still very, very active in the Bar Association. I've had committees and task force. I've been a VP of the Bar Association. That's a place where I see lawyers really do help lawyers. Lawyers watch out for young lawyers. I will make suggestions to them and introductions for them. So there's lots of different ways you can go, but that's been very helpful.
Yeah, I would just add quickly. I agree with all of that. I think it's really distinguishing yourself to find that thing that makes you different than everybody else that the employer is looking at. But also, too, it's not a straight line, right? I think it's more of a marathon in one's career than it is picking the right destination right out of the box. For example, if you're an antitrust lawyer, you can easily start at the government, work there for a number of years, and then try and trade up into big law if that's something you want to do. And certainly you can do the opposite. If you want to start out at a firm and then go, your goal is to go work in the government, then you can do that. And so I think you have to think about constantly, taking the best options you can, but keeping your head up and constantly thinking about how I'm going to manage my career to distinguish myself. So maybe I can't get that perfect job today. Maybe it's 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, but it's about positioning yourself to kind of be ready to be a great candidate for that job, and then looking for the opportunities when they come your way.
Right. Remember, you are your product.
Exactly.
And if I could add just one thing, I know that at least in my years when I was in law school, our student demographic was not, it was pretty diverse. There were law as a second career individuals. There were people right out of college. I had a friend who was a retired physician who decided to do this for fun, and then ended up practicing afterwards and did litigation. I thought that was awesome. But if you're finding yourself struggling, highlight some of your other experiences. I mean, you may have worked at IBM. You might have worked at a firm or a company that is a potential client. Highlight that. Firms like that because they like that connection, and that's a business development thing. And maybe you may not have, great grades, but you have a great personality, and they can see that. And if that comes through in your interview, and that you have these personal contacts with, high profile companies or individuals, that's attractive as well.
So a lot of great feedback on ways to market yourself and to kind of distinguish your strengths, even if grades aren't the thing that is the strength. I definitely identify with Lana in my job search. I spent a significant amount of time between my first and second year during that summer, and I searched every website for my law school alums. I sent cold emails, and for every 10, maybe one responded. But several of those people ended up being my interviewer when I did on-campus interviews or had a callback interview. So you never know kind of where your paths will cross again. So always put forth your best effort first, and those relationships can really take you a long way. Because you've heard it here, it's a combination of your skill and luck. So you're always kind of trying to put yourself in the best possible situation. So let's take a look at a few other topics. So outside of law school, what steps and what experiences should students and graduates seek out to prepare for a career in law or a particular practice to be an effective advocate for their client? So Cisco, could you weigh in on that?
I mean, it's a little bit about the points that I mentioned a second ago about having that desire with what you practice, which means that you're going outside of what the classroom requires. Kind of to Hermes' point about going to bar association meetings. You know, it's all about creating something that can distinguish you is I always find the key to your career. It's the key to getting clients when you are at a law firm. It can be the key to making partner above your contemporaries and peers in your first year class at your law firm, or it can make all the difference between getting that promotion. And so, you know, the one thing I've always found is to kind of focus on making yourself better than what is the par, trying to shoot for the birdie, so to speak, using kind of golf parlance. I kind of found this out when I was a first year in law school. And it's actually a reason maybe that I didn't graduate in the top 10% of my class. You know, in the first year, you kind of learn about outlines, and you learn about, you can buy outlines at the bookstore. You can share outlines with your classmates. And what that does is it kind of drives you to the middle. And what I found is that you want to actually do the opposite. You want to swim out of the middle and go to the top. And the best thing I learned as a first year law student was that I really did need to commit myself to read all the cases, to do all of the work on my own. I knew that it was almost impossible to do. And as much as you want to go to Fagan's and go grab a beer or do whatever it is that you can do to have fun, I found that really committing yourself to your practice and to your craft outside of what the teachers ask you to do is what's going to get you better grades. And then it's also going to, you know, you're going to find that thing that you love that you are going to be more committed to. And so for me, that was the biggest thing I learned in first year law school, was to avoid being caught into the middle of using prepared outlines or things like that. And instead doing it on my own, doing it in the best way that I can, and then finding the things that I really do like, because if I like it, I'm going to be better at it. And so that's why I kept on taking tax class after tax class, because I really, really liked it. And then I decided to participate in tax moot court, even though I'm not necessarily a litigator by trade or tax controversy, attracted to tax controversy. So I would say that's maybe something outside of law school, which is like just finding out what kind of person I want to be as a lawyer. And what I wanted to be is honest with myself and get myself out of the middle and rise to the top by doing all the things outside of what my teachers were telling me to do to be better. I hope that's helpful. Does anyone else have any experience here outside of class?
Hermes, did you want to weigh in there in terms of what steps or experiences? We know you mentioned the bar associations, but anything else that you would recommend?
You know, in law school, I really was focused on my classes as much as, more than anything. I was also married. I was married young, and so I had my wife, and then I had law school, and I had a part-time job all the way through. But the law school piece is, I think you have to look. There's certain inflection points almost that at least for me, I remember from law school. A first-year professor who talked about, let's look at what the other consequences are of the decisions, right? So basically teaching the lesson to look at things from a different perspective, which is always extremely helpful when you're practicing law. A tax course I took, and I've never done any tax, and in fact, I wound up auditing the class. But a tax professor who, I think in his class, what I really learned wasn't tax. I learned how to harmonize cases, which turned out to be a great analytical skill for a lawyer. So different pieces come along to you at different times. You know, I do fall back on the Bar Association because I found that to have been one of the most helpful things of anything that I've done. And there's an ethos in the Bar Association really of lawyers helping lawyers. So you see constantly if younger people come along or people who don't know anybody, other lawyers grab them and introduce them and push them into places and say, you should do this and you should do that, and let me introduce you. And those things just become very, very helpful. Somebody said something else about preparing yourself. And Professor, it might have been you, but I think it's in terms of preparation, right? You have to prepare yourself to be lucky, because you don't know when these doors are going to open up or when the chance is going to be there. And if you're not ready, it passes you right by. So you've got to be prepared to be lucky.
Yeah, one thing I would add to, and I agree with all that, those great comments, is I think about what it takes to be a good lawyer or a partner at a big law firm and work with clients. I think there's the technical capabilities, and so obviously you got to be a really good lawyer and be on top of your field. And I agree with what Cisco and Hermes said. I think also though too, you have to kind of have that client service mindset too. I've had a lot of jobs in my career. One of the jobs, I have to be honest, that I really learned probably the most from was being a sales associate at Sears Roebuck, before law school. And I think you have to kind of bring that interpersonal skill set too. We have a lot of demanding clients at my firm, right? As I'm sure all the people on this call do. And I think they really appreciate it when you bring that expertise to the table. You're a great lawyer. You're one that thinks about the bigger picture, but also very good at giving them great service and helping them solve their problems. And so I think you have to have enough of a background and kind of a sophistication that comes more than just your technical expertise. There's a lot of smart lawyers out there. I think the ones that excel are the smart ones that really kind of have that other skill set, which is interpersonal skills, commitment to service. I think when clients are paying, $2,000 an hour, for your services, they expect more than you just to say, here's the legal answer, right? They want the strategic answer, but also too, they want to hang out with you too. And so you want to not be just someone that, can talk the law. You really need to kind of have a broader horizon. And so I think a lot of clients, really enjoy when you bring more to the table than just, the technical expertise.
David, that last point you made is huge, because I think that's something that develops over time for all of us. Is you have to find clients that align with you, right? But it's not, we align with our clients, but they also have to align with you. So do you click with certain people? Do you click with what their industries are and what their interests are?
Right.
That happens.
I totally agree with David's point also about bringing more to the table, and kind of tying back to that idea about law school outlines. Believe it or not, in the practice of law, there are outlines that are available to us too. There's practical law, B&A. I'm sure David and Antitrust has the horn book that's available.
Yep.
Well, believe it or not, our clients have those horn books too. They're sitting on their shelves. And so they're looking for something more than what's just the horn book answer. They're looking for someone that is practical and someone that is really solution oriented. And that's kind of, where you can rise above. When you can put it all together and you can come up with that idea that isn't in the book, so to speak, as to a solution, you'd be surprised how that can win a client, and then you can keep a client for a very long time just because of the fact that you can think well on your feet.
And just coming back to this concept of IRAC, again, going off of what Cisco just said, I can produce advice to a client on what the law says, but the client doesn't want just what the law says. They want the application of the law applied to their scenario. So I think where my clients will come back to me is because I won't just tell them what they could read on their own. I tailor it specifically to them, and I do it in a timely manner. And there's nothing worse than when, Miller Canfield, it's a small law firm, but sometimes I work with much bigger law firms and they take days to answer. My clients know I'll have the advice to them the next day. And that differentiates you.
So thank you. So I think our takeaway there is it's both an IQ and EQ kind of requirement. You have to know the law, but then you have to have the people skills to help you be able to apply the law in a way that makes it an enjoyable experience for your client. They don't want to engage with someone who's not helpful, who's not resourceful, who's not their friend, because a lot of times you develop friendships and significant relationships with your clients. And even before your clients, you develop those friendships and relationships with your superiors within your law firm. So the same applies for both sets of relationships, and you can really differentiate yourself by having both the legal skill and that interpersonal skill. Now, Amy, in your kind of practice, you have a lot of collaboration and teamwork. How does that factor in on the day-to-day? And then what does that look like now that we're living in the time of COVID-19?
Right. So teaming is every day for me, whether it's with fellow attorneys in my firm, clients. I represent a lot of energy clients throughout the country, and most of my work comes from a very large client in Canada. And so, they're not here. And so a lot of times, and now with COVID, it's interesting because I've had to learn how to use Microsoft Teams, and there's been a lot of Zooming and et cetera. But on a regular basis, I'm communicating with the GC, I'm communicating with the Director of Property Tax for whichever client I'm dealing with, their accounting department, their operations folks who are on the field actually, in the generating facilities so that I can get information. I was an English major in undergrad. If you think for a minute, I thought that I was going to go to law school and become an energy and property tax lawyer. That wasn't even remotely on my mind to know they existed. When I started here at the firm, I was in 4 groups: land use, zoning, environmental, property tax. I didn't even know what property tax was. And then it's kind of, funneled into mostly property tax for energy clients. And you have to approach issues in a way, just like Lana said, your client wants answers and they want them quickly. And a lot of times you need their help because it's highly specialized, and you might have a facility that has umpteen million component parts. And when you're dealing with a property tax case, you're dealing with an assessor who has 2 days of training, who has assessed this property at several hundreds of millions of dollars because they looked on Google and thought that that might be a good amount. And I'm not joking you. I've had meetings with assessors prior to filing lawsuits to try to negotiate reductions. And when you've asked what's their methodology, their answer is, oh, I Googled it and I saw that another plant was worth this, so I thought that made sense. It's kind of frightening. So when you get to the trial stage, you have, not only your client, and you have experts, you have engineers, you have real property appraisers, you have the client, you have the folks that actually run the facility. It is a team effort at all times. And just before this call, I was on a call with one of the accounting folks who's based in Ontario, Canada, and we had a Teams call to discuss discovery responses because I'm involved in a case here in New York State, and I can't answer the questions. You can answer the legal piece of the question. You can object. You can give well thought out objections to questions, but you don't know what the capital expenditures, major maintenance. Again, never took an accounting class in my life, and I have to read accounting spreadsheets on a daily basis. I'm looking at income and expenses. I'm vetting, whether or not entries are, should be taxable or not. These are not things I was prepared for, but keep an open mind because, you never know where your path will lead. And I find this stuff fascinating. And I'll tell you something, there's nothing like going for a ride up to the Adirondacks, spending a day in the summer, walking through a hydroelectric facility. And, some of them have these gorgeous dams that, look like Niagara Falls. And you're billing a client for spending, 6 hours of the day outside and walking through a plant and learning about the mechanics of it. Again, something not even remotely on my mind when I was in law school that would ever happen. Didn't know these things existed. But in COVID, what's been interesting now is you'll see I'm in my office right now, but this is unusual. I'm a mother. I have 2 small children, and for anyone who has kids and has watched the news, they don't go to school every day. And so in addition to having to practice, and I have a very busy litigation practice, I have to try and teach them at the same time and sleep sometimes. But my clients are dealing with the same thing. And so when I'm on a Microsoft Teams meeting in my son's bedroom, literally on his dresser, because we don't have 4 desks in my house at the moment, and because we're all kind of operating in different areas, and that's a pretty quiet place where I can use it as a standing desk. You know, sometimes my little one will come in and he'll pop his head up and say, "Are you on mute? Can they see me?" And I have to just swat him out, and he's 8. And the clients are very, very accommodating. They get it. And a lot of times they're in their kitchens. The gentleman I was on the phone with, his wife was in the background bringing him something to eat as we were talking. It's become a very odd normal, but you have to get your work done. And another example I can give in terms of how COVID has affected my practice in an interesting way. Again, I'll use this Canadian client as an example. There's currently a travel ban. No one from Canada is allowed in, with very, very limited exceptions, but there's certainly no exception for having to appear at hearings at administrative local boards. And I have cases in Maine, I have cases in California, I have cases here in New York State. And it's interesting because, as everybody knows, every state has taken a different stance on how their local jurisdictions, at least, in terms of whether they're allowing the public in, whether they're allowing appearances for local hearings and such. And some have been accommodating when I've indicated that, you know, the person who needs to be there in person, if you request an in-person hearing, is in Canada. He is legally prohibited from entry into this country. So can I have an extension? No. Okay. So this is going to be interesting. So these are the issues that you have to try to work around and negotiate, and you know, whether or not you can try and convince, you know, can I come in their stead, and can we Zoom, and oh, sorry, our jurisdiction doesn't have Wi-Fi, believe it or not, in 2020 in a little podunk town in Maine. That's the case. So you're dealing with not only legal issues, but practical issues, and you need to come up with a solution, because if not, you know, your client's potentially out of several $1 million of potential reductions, in my case, of excessive tax, you know, liability, simply because they can't appear at a hearing and they get denied for failure to appear. So these are, it's a very strange time. And like I said, it's been highly frustrating in some respects, because there's jurisdictions being completely unreasonable. And then there's others that are working with us and pushing out deadlines. But then, you know, it's a give and take. Then all of a sudden it's, well, we'll allow that, but we're going to waive interest on any potential reduction for the 4 weeks we're giving you. So these are some of the interesting issues that I'm dealing with personally in my practice, and it's every day. And every day COVID is the cloud over all of everything going on in my life, both personally and professionally. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. Has anyone else's practice or the way they go about handling things, has it changed significantly? I know for some corporate folks, there's not that much interaction, particularly if you're doing a deal or something of that nature. But I'm curious to know if COVID has significantly changed anyone else's practice.
I've had a huge impact on my practice, not just from the fact I'm working at home, but when I came to Albany and I was on the Governor Mayor Cuomo staff, that was in the early days of the AIDS epidemic. And when COVID came along, I had some experience in a new epidemic. So I kind of stepped forward in the firm and said, let me help lead this. And that's meant that I've touched base with all kinds of clients, firm clients that I had no idea even existed. Because especially with the New York-based practice, and the devastation that COVID caused in March, April, and May, right? We were dealing with a fire hose, just a pure outpouring of executive orders and regulations on a daily basis, where it was almost impossible to keep up. I was doing nothing but reading executive orders and guidance documents from state agencies from the moment I got up until I went to bed, and was going to bed later and later. And we were getting calls from all kinds of clients. And that's still occurring now, from people I've never touched base with or had heard of, are calling because they've got very specific issues, whether it's the travel advisories we've dealt with in New York, or which Amy just mentioned, but all kinds of other issues. So I'm dealing with our labor and employment practice lawyers quite a bit more than I ever did, dealing with manufacturers that would have had no reason to ever talk to me. Those kinds of things have been really very, very different. And so it's been expansive. As a firm, we've also undertaken, because we really saw a need and got great response from clients, we're doing weekly webinars every Tuesday on just select topics. We're putting like 4 or 5 lawyers on. Everybody's supposed to speak for 8 or 10 minutes, which as lawyers is pretty tough to do. But we do that. And then we've got other kinds of webinars going on as well. And that's been something that has been really rewarding, because clients will make a point to say, thank you so much for doing this. You're synthesizing for us what we need to know. And it's, what we didn't know what we'd get out of it, or whether it was going to be anything useful other than a public service as opposed to really a client building exercise. And it's been both. And so that's really been a very different process for us.
I can chime in here because I just had COVID interrupt me on this Zoom call. My daughter saw a little blue fence lizard in our kitchen, and so she could not walk through the house until I removed the lizard from our house. COVID's been traumatic to my practice. As an executive compensation and employee benefits lawyer, there have been a tremendous number of reductions in force and furloughs of employees, and constant advice on how to do things in a legal way that don't cause tax or securities problems. A lot of employers, at least here in Silicon Valley, have reduced cash compensation to their employees, and as a result have decided to reward folks and try to keep people incented and retained using equity awards. But unfortunately, switching from cash to restricted stock or stock options is not as easy as just flipping a switch. And so I've been actually busier than I've ever been this year, which kind of going to Amy's point is makes things 20 times harder when you have 3 kids that are homeschooled and you're trying to teach them and handle all of their issues like blue belly fence lizards in the kitchen. It's just, it's been a big change. Now I have gotten extra time because I don't have to commute to work into Palo Alto. But at the same time, the blending of work and home life, I found to be incredibly stressful and something that's very difficult to navigate. I have done my very best to try to build walls, personal walls, mental health walls. So, every Wednesday, I know my kids are done kind of with homeschool at 3 o'clock. I live in the Santa Cruz Mountains, south of San Francisco. I take my kids on a 2-hour walk on the hills, and we get it out, and then we come back, and then I'm ready to get back to work after a mental health break. So I'm busier than ever, but at the same time have more placed on my plate. But busier than ever at work, and now I'm busier than ever at home. That's the big change from COVID for me.
Thank you. And so as we can see, this issue reaches us all, both personally and professionally. We have 2 more questions that we have generated, and then we're going to shift to some of the questions from the audience. So quickly, David, we're constantly talking about business development, but could you kind of explain what that is and give some insights into what that means for junior lawyers, as well as what that means as one's career progresses?
Sure. Yeah, I think people throw that around, and a lot of people think it's got to be out there doing flashy, fancy things in terms of, meeting with clients and doing pitches. And I think that's much further in your career, is when that really comes into play, when you're more senior, more experienced. I think the best thing, and I've heard this a million times from my mentors, and I was skeptical, but I think it's so true, is that the best business development that a young lawyer can do is doing a fabulous job for your existing client. Don't look beyond that client. Do a great job for that client, because guess what? as a junior lawyer, you're dealing with the more junior people at the company. That might be like the associate GC, maybe deputy GC in a small company. Guess what? Those people grow up and they become the decision makers. They become the new clients. And so I can't tell you how much has benefited me in just making sure that if I'm like the third associate, on a matter, and there's a partner and other people more senior than me, you still have to kind of own that relationship. And so you have to really think about how important your role is to make sure that the firm and the rest of the team really are seen as being, great advocates, great service providers for that client. And what happens is that client really appreciates that. And guess what? That same client will come back and get, you don't own clients, right? Clients constantly think about moving. People are out there pitching them. And so you want that to be as easy as possible for them to come back to you. And that's the one thing that junior lawyers really contribute to, is that they do a great job. The client sees that and they want to come back for more work. And as I said, as the clients get older and people retire, as you get older, you'll find that your relationships become more important for that person who's making the decisions. I think the other important thing for a young lawyer, we've talked about this a bit, is just make sure that you're developing your own career. It's your responsibility to think about what do I make sure that I'm developing as a lawyer. Maybe I'm not getting the assignments that I really want to develop. Make sure you're outspoken about that at the firm. If you're at a firm, to say, I really need more litigation experience or something to round out your career, so that you become a more valuable team member, and maybe, again, you're not a partner yet, but you really can provide that substantive expertise. And clients see that, right? I mean, these days, clients are very cost conscious. And when you pitch something, they're not going to say, well, who's the partner? They want to know who the team is. And so you want to make sure that, and we talked about this, that you stand out. When the partners are thinking about a pitch team or just, an introduction to a client, that you're on that list because you've stood out in terms of your client service. You're standing out in terms of the things you're doing outside of the firm, bar association work, you're writing articles, you're kind of seen as someone that they see as a very valuable member. And as you get older, you'll obviously have the ability to expand those relationships and work with the firm, if you're at a firm, to go out there and actually pitch work. I think that, and for me, what was really important was, all the things we've been talking about is, doing a great job for the clients, thinking about, going to work for the government. As an antitrust lawyer, I can't tell you how valuable it has been to me to have done government service. And so it's constantly thinking about how you can improve yourself. That's the real business development. At some point you'll get to be, 40, 50 years old, and you might have an opportunity to kind of go out and cold call clients. But I can tell you that's not the growth area for firms, right? They love to go, find new clients, but the reality is hang on the clients you have and expand the relationships with those clients.
I couldn't agree more with what David has said there. And I would say that, when you walk into the law firm, whether it's a small law firm or a large law firm, on the first day, your client is actually the partners that you are initially working for. And your business development is really getting to know your other associates, get to know your contemporaries, get to know the other people that can give you work, not just that one partner or those two partners or that practice group that hired you. Get to know everyone within the firm and get to know what other people's skill sets are. And you'd be surprised by the wealth of knowledge that you can sponge from that. And then at the same time, become someone that gets integrated within your firm or within your group, so that you can do different things. Believe it or not, kind of something that is in David's wheelhouse. Way back when, somebody told me 15 years ago that if you grant a stock option to someone that has a value of more than $75 million, you may have to do a Hart-Scott-Rodino filing. And sure enough, 10 years later, I was involved in a stock option award. I was a part of a merger and acquisition that was worth $175 million. And I just mentioned it to the corporate lawyer. I said, hey, make sure that the antitrust guy knows about the Hart-Scott-Rodino filing for the CEO's Equity Award. And the only reason I knew about that is because I was friends with the antitrust associate that was 2 floors down, and we'd like to grab coffee together. So I would say business development as a junior lawyer is within your firm, within your practice group, and your clients really are those partners that initially hired you, and then branch out from there.
Going to what David and Cisco said, I would also add that business development, and I had to learn this the hard way in my first year as an associate, is not necessarily that you go out and you network and you meet someone and they work for a really great company and they're going to hire you immediately the next day. It might be someone you keep running into at an event for 5 years, and then one day they call you up because at that point they know you enough to know what you do, and they need a lawyer and you're the first person they think of. So it's also not going out and always thinking of everything as an opportunity to get a client immediately, but thinking of the long term. So developing relationships, being kind. My boss is really good at being kind to, the paralegals that don't even work at our law firm, because you never know who is going to be, like, as to what David was saying, right? The young associate might one day be the GC. So you need to be, like, a lot of lawyers can be mean, but if you're kind to everyone, they'll remember that, and you will be rewarded for that 10 years down the line. And going to what David said too, so you are your own brand. You don't need to stand behind your law firm name. You don't have to stand behind your law school name. You should be your own selling point. And this has helped me a lot, because all of my clients who were with me at K&L Gates transferred to my little law firm, not because they knew my law firm, but because they wanted me working on their matters. So just remember, you are special in and of yourself, and you shouldn't need anything else other than maybe a good team to sell yourself.
Thanks. Lots of great nuggets in there. And for anyone who doesn't know, GC is General Counsel. So just to make sure we're all on the same page. I know we've thrown that out a lot and acronyms become a thing. So just want to make sure we're clear. And before we turn to our kind of audience questions, Hermes, you have a diverse group of clients, and you just mentioned with your new role, kind of overseeing things with COVID, you're now interacting with additional clients. So what's it like to manage those client relationships, and what's that experience been like for you?
I don't know if I would say I manage any of it. I bounce along through it. But you wind up with different clients. I mentioned earlier, I think you have to find your way to align with the clients that you have and the clients you develop. So I've got some clients that have been with me for a long, long time. And it's because we clicked. I had a skill set they needed, but they also saw that I cared about what they do. And my practice, is not like David or Cisco's or even Amy's. It's really a regional practice. I mean, it couldn't be more glamorous. My clients go from Buffalo to Long Island. I've got people in Utica and Binghamton and Syracuse and the Bronx and Brooklyn that I represent, as well as Manhattan. But it really is, I think, do the clients see that I care about what they're doing, and am I trying to help them do it? Many of my clients are not-for-profits and they're mission-driven, and that becomes extremely important that they see you as committed to the mission that they are so committed to. And then I've got these others that have developed over time, right, that are in the for-profit sector, and yet even there, it's still, if it may not be mission-driven, but they're still looking for you to be committed to them and what they are trying to do at the moment. So it's, that's how I at least stay close to them in terms of managing them. That becomes one of the skill sets I think you need as a lawyer, right? Is to learn how to manage your clients, whether it's in the litigation where you're managing your clients' expectations and getting them to understand what a good result is, right? Or simply managing what can occur. I mean, I try, never to say no to clients, although sometimes I say to them, don't do that. Let's go down this path to figure out how you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. And let's figure out what you really want to accomplish. I think the thing I learned in the first week of law school, that the law depends on the facts, right? That's my mantra. Is barely look at what's in the regulations of the statute. I'm starting from, okay, what's the client want to achieve and what law do we need so the client can achieve what they want in a way that will be helpful to the client. So it's, it's staying near them is a big piece of managing them.
Thank you. So let's jump in for a sec to see some of our audience questions. So I see here, there's a question about those of you who have lateraled. And so the question is about what motivated you to do so. So I know, Lana, you've kind of talked about, your desire to kind of practice the law you want. But would anyone else kind of like to give some insight into what prompted that move?
Yeah, well, I'm the guy that that can't hold a job, so maybe I'll weigh in, Professor Stokes. I mean, I lateraled to the government. I think as people heard in my little run through, I did that twice. I didn't really plan on doing it twice, but it just made sense and kind of goes back to keeping yourself in a position to take advantage of luck and opportunities. And I think that's what kind of led me there. I certainly thought that doing that would be a benefit to me. I knew going in that I was going to come back to private practice, which I did. I've also though moved firms, and so the biggest move I've made in my career was 2.5 years ago. I moved to Skadden from Jones Day, both of which are tremendous, great law firms. But for me, it was a couple of things. One is I had ideas that evolved over what I really thought would be a great place to practice law, and I really liked the Skadden culture. It's one thing that people don't always think about too is culture matters. I think. One thing I've learned over time is it's great to be at a great firm. It's great to have a great job, but you kind of want to enjoy the place. You want to enjoy the people. And for me, that was really important. As I got older, maybe I matured, I don't know. I think that became more important to me to be around people that I really respected and felt more, kind of a connection to. And so it's not, I think, you have to, certainly don't want to be seen as someone that moves around all the time. I mean, I joke about it, but I really have spent time, at 3 or 4 law firms, but they've all been at different kind of points in my career. I don't expect to ever move again, never say never, but I think it has to be a really, if you're someone who's thinking about making a move, it's got to make sense for your career plan. And when someone asks, why did you move? I think you have to have a good explanation for that. Certainly people move more than they did in the old days. No longer is it, I think you go to a firm and you're there for life. I think that's so rare these days. And in a lot of firms, like for example, at Skadden, it's very hard to make partner at a big New York firm. And so I think you have to kind of be open to different paths. And again, it's not one straight path. You have to be prepared to kind of take those different turns if it makes sense within your career.
I've lateraled twice in my career, and I was told this by my old senior associate, the first guy that I ever kind of treated as a client, going back to the prior point. He said, you always make a move if it's materially better. And materially better will probably keep you from making dumb moves. So, chasing a bonus that's $25,000, probably not materially better. On the other hand, a law firm that has great clients, a cachet of clients, it's better than the law firm that you currently are at. That's materially better. And believe it or not, it does catch up with you. I mean, at some point, when I receive resumes and I see people looking to make lateral hires and I see multiple moves, it makes me very skeptical. Are they a mercenary, only looking for top dollar? That essentially puts the resume in the recycling bin. I am looking for someone that is attracted to DLA Piper because of what DLA Piper represents as an international global firm, not just more money. I would say that that's really important. And I would always kind of go back to what my old senior associate said. If you're going to make a move, it better be materially better to your life or to your practice.
So we have a question here for you in particular, Amy, from another Syracuse native who wants to know what the legal market is like here in the area.
Well, it depends on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for a firm experience, there's 3 big firms, if you will. There's moderate sized firms, there's small firms, there's solo practitioners, there's the district attorney's office, there's city corp counsel's office. I actually, I sit on the board of directors for the Central New York Women's Bar Association, and my colleagues that I serve with, it's a wonderful, diverse group of women and a few men actually, which is great. And it ranges from solo practitioner up to big firm. So if the question is, you know, what are the options and opportunities, there really is a diverse opportunity for a legal experience, depending on what you want to do. Syracuse doesn't have a lot of in-house positions, like big companies, if you will. They have, you know, Syracuse University, and there's hospitals, there's Upstate Medical University. I have friends who I worked with years ago who are in-house there. And it's a completely different experience. There's something to be said about, I guess, no billable hours. I don't know what that world is. I've lived by every 6 minutes of my life for a very long time. I don't know what it's like to not account for every minute of my life, but I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And I think this is probably best directed to you, Cisco, or anyone else who I guess has had experience with any type of tax practice. But their question is regarding an LLM, the benefits of that. Is it recommended if you would like to practice in tax?
So as far as tax LLMs, tax is an interesting field, because if you stack up the Internal Revenue Code and it's 8-point font, it stacks up to about 3 feet tall, double-sided, eight volumes. And so tax is one of those areas that if you didn't practice tax before going to law school, or didn't have a tax background, it's very difficult to enter into a law firm and make that case that you want to be a tax lawyer when you haven't done it before, especially when it's as difficult as it is. So you can take tax 1 and tax 2 and state and gift tax, but it's very hard to make that compelling case. Unfortunately, I didn't know about tax law, and I didn't. If you would have asked me on day 1 when I was walking out of the parking lot up the hill, and you would have said, "Hey, you'll be a tax lawyer in 20 years," I would have said, "Ha ha, that's a joke." And here I am, a tax lawyer. So I didn't have a tax background. I had talked to Professor Nassau and Professor Germain, and another professor who's not at Syracuse anymore named Professor Black, about the fact that I didn't have a tax background, but I wanted to be a tax lawyer. And they said, well, tax LLM is something that you might want to consider to make that compelling case, to make you more attractive, especially with the people that are at the consulting firms, that are at E&Y or Deloitte, and they're looking to get out and move into a law firm. So I pursued a tax LLM. I thought it was very important. There's basically 3 programs that are very respected: Florida, Georgetown, and NYU. I took that deferred comp class, so I knew I wanted to be an employee benefits driven tax lawyer, and Georgetown had the best within that subset. So I decided to go to Georgetown and invest 1 more year. As far as LLMs, like in general, I would say that an LLM is always a valuable consideration because it imparts knowledge on you. Whether it makes a difference in getting a job, I've only really seen it in the world of tax. And it's only really with those 3 programs where it's making a material difference and adding something, it's adding a feather to your resume that can distinguish you. But that being said, an LLM is always something that's valuable to consider, because 1, if you're a foreign lawyer, it can qualify you for the bar exam. Most states say that you have to at least go to law school for 1 year. The second is it imparts knowledge in you. Knowledge is that skill set. We've talked about that's part of the factors-based success you're going to have, to be knowledgeable, to be technically proficient. So it's always something that's valuable. You just have to, as a person, decide whether to, what's the risk versus the reward. One kind of tax point I would mention to anyone considering an LLM: if you go and work for 1 year at a law firm or in the government and do what you do, and then you go get an LLM, your LLM degree will be tax deductible to you as an expense that you've incurred in your trade or business. However, if you go straight from law school to go LLM and you don't have a tax background or a background in that, it is not tax deductible to you. So I would always encourage someone that if you want to get that extra tax deduction, You know, so you can deduct your $50,000 or $40,000 in tuition, go work for a year. See if what you want to do is really it, if you can get a job. And then if you want that knowledge imparted in you, then go get that LLM. And maybe if you work at a law firm or you go work for an employer and they really want to invest in you, maybe they'll also subsidize the cost through a tuition reimbursement program.
And if you guys can't tell, this is why they pay Cisco the big bucks for his tax advice. So take that one with you if you're interested in any type of tax practice. So just one final question before we close, and I'll just ask a couple of you to share. I'll start with you, David, since this is a milestone reunion for you. We have a group of students and alums gathered here. Do you mind sharing one of your fondest law school memories?
I do. I have a lot of them, so I had to think about this a little bit. I mean, it's funny when people ask me about Syracuse. It definitely has a special place in my heart. And it's funny because, and maybe not, you know, people pick the times that they had the most fun. I had the most fun my first year. Like, I thought that was, you know, everyone was equal. You had no rankings. You had no law review. You just had a bunch of, you know, and back then it was like 240 of us, so it was a pretty big class. And it just brought together this huge melting pot of people with diverse backgrounds. And I just really enjoyed all being in the same boat together. You know, we'd be, you know, obviously had broken up into law firm classes. And so I mean, it was a group of like 80 of us that would spend a lot of classes together. And it was just getting to know those people, really expanding my horizons. You know, I came from upstate New York, not far from Binghamton, and kind of seeing the diversity and all aspects of diversity at Syracuse and learning from that. I think it kind of goes back to me. I think I had great professors, had great relationships with my professors, but I think about what I learned that first year from my fellow colleagues, my fellow students was just immense, you know, and learning from, they came from all different parts of the country, all different backgrounds. And I found that to be a very strong camaraderie and built relationships that continue to this day, you know. And it kind of goes back to the, you know, and I didn't think of it that way, but I mean, you have great friendships that can also turn into business opportunities as well. And so a lot of the Syracuse alum are immensely successful, and kind of knowing them and kind of working with them has been a great experience for me. But it's really that first year that, you know, you're all stressed out and hanging out at Fagan's, or, you know, putting your resumes in the slots. I think, you know, that was something we did as well, but it was just a great time and a lot of, you know, camaraderie.
Lana, what about you?
Sorry, just unmuting. So unlike David, I would say it was definitely hard for me to move to Syracuse. I had been living in Lebanon before that, so it was a very big difference. But I do have one good memory. I threw a birthday, it was not like a loud or no alcohol involved birthday party for a fellow classmate in the library. The librarians were not happy, but everyone in the library got cake that day. So it was a really fun time.
Thanks. And what about you, Cisco?
I would say that, believe it or not, I still remember getting out of my blue Jeep in the parking lot and walking to the first day. That's actually my fondest memory, because I felt as a person that I had kind of made a leap from being a student who was just wearing gym shoes and jeans and to, you know, on the road to being a professional person. I'd worked since I was 16, you know, started as a dishwasher at a restaurant. So for me, it was a big deal. That was I can literally remember walking up the hill.
So I just want to say it has been such a joy for me to be able to meet all of you, to have this conversation. I hope that the audience is as excited as I am about all of the possibilities, and the fact that, you know, we've learned that the road is not straight. There are lots of paths we can take, but if we invest in ourselves, if we develop ourselves, the future is bright and the opportunities are endless. Even in the time of COVID, we have opportunities that are presented in this experience as well. We can better strategize, we can think of new solutions. And so I just really want to say thanks to each of you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of Alumni Weekend. And Sophie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Stokes, for Your comments, reflections, and your expert moderation of this panel's coverage, what timely issues and good guidance for our students and alumni too. I do want to thank you also, panelists, for spending your afternoon with us. We do appreciate it. I agree with Professor Stokes and Kelsey, who said that despite the many challenges of this pandemic, it has opened new opportunities, and we're proud to take advantage of them. And we appreciate all of you for joining us. As for all of you in the audience, thank you also for being here. We look forward to seeing you throughout the entire weekend. Tonight, we host our first College of Law Advocacy Program alumni reunion from 7 to 8. And then you can actually tune in to the first round of this year's Mackenzie Hughes competition. You can watch our students in action. Do remember that you can log on to the WOVA app, and you can also use our website for assistance in finding all the links to our various programs. And finally, I wish you a very good evening. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning, bright and early at 9 a.m. for Dean Boyce's State of the College address. So thanks again and see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.